Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another GEB America podcast. I'm David Groves, your host today, and we are coming to you from our studios here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I want to say a special thank you to Gladius Solutions and Energized Health for their support of the podcast. Really excited to have a special guest with us today. Dave Jewitt is with us. He is the founder, kind of the brains behind this incredible system that you will really want to hear about. It's the idea of your 1 degree, which is a guide for bringing clarity and focus and effectiveness to your life. Did I say that right, Dave?
Yes, you did.
Very good. Well, Dave, thanks for joining us today.
Good to be here.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the speakers and not necessarily those of GEB America, Oral Roberts University, or their employees. This program is not intended to offer investment, financial, medical, legal, or any other advice. Viewers should consult a subject matter professional regarding any such matters. So, Dave, kind of for those that are tuning in, they're like, well, what do you mean your 1 degree? Is this a college class? What are we talking about here? Can you tell everybody kind of how you first kind of stumbled upon this?
Well, if it's any consolation, my father still thought it was about college degree. So, but it's really the idea of the 360 degrees you can go in life, that God has 1 degree for you, which really speaks to intense focus and direction. So then we try to anyway. That's what really is about. So
yeah. So for those that maybe are familiar with different ways of assessing things for employees and people in their DISC and Myers-Briggs and all that, how does this kind of look at it from a different point of view?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. One is it's more of a composite look at who you are, because we look at abilities that actually energize your heart. Yeah. Not just abilities you're good at, but what actually energizes you. And we actually help people figure out, okay, we might have 50 abilities that energize us, but what are the ones that are the strongest of those abilities? And then we look at what is your story about? There's a story that's been created that you've been living out. Well, it matters in understanding what your story is about, and even what messages are coming out of your story that are going to be important for you to pass on to others. Then we look at, what do you know? What are the things you love to learn about? I believe that what you know about and what you have loved to learn about, or what you've had to learn about, are important in terms of how they connect you with certain people. Then next thing is what do you care about? At this point in your life, who do you most want to help do what? A lot of us have a hard time saying no to things we don't really care about.
Right. True.
People are trying to get us to care about what they care about. But it's time to start to kind of lead yourself into who are you and how has God been preparing you to be a blessing to people? The next thing would be spiritual gifts. What are those gifts that God's given you that He really uses to impact people? Lastly, your key personality strengths and your capacities. So as those things fit together, there's certain things of your life that have been elevated. Certain personality traits that seem to help people more. Certain knowledge that you have help people more. So that's what this process is about. That's different from a lot of the great assessments that are out there. It's more of a full look at who you are. Right. And also it's from the perspective of, this is what God has been doing in your life. And this is what God wants you to focus on. It isn't just nice information about you. It has this kind of a spiritual aspect to it.
Yeah, it's not just, like you said, an assessment where you look at it from the standpoint of, okay, great, now maybe I can excel better at my job, but it goes deeper than that, because it really determines, like you said, what brings you alive. And also, it gives you a list of those things that maybe help you identify what really helps you look at from a standpoint of what kind of takes that energy away, what really pulls you down.
Yeah.
With those, you got the greens and you got the reds. Not to give too much away, but I think that's really eye opening for a lot of people. Is they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that I don't like doing that, and that really does, kind of, drain me.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that's driven this process for me is I'm very concerned that very few people finish well in life.
Hmm.
They just kind of run out of gas. They run out of passion.
Yeah.
I've probably asked 3,000 people over the years if they know personally 5 men over 50 who still inspire them. And only 3 men have told me that they know 5 personally.
Wow.
And probably less than 100 have told me that they know 1 that still inspires them after 50. So it's caused me to ask, well, where'd these people go that used to
Hmm.
inspire us?
Yeah.
And so it's a real loss. It's a real loss to those people individually, but also to those of us who would love to be inspired.
Yeah. So for somebody that is first hearing about this and they're interested, tell everybody where they can kind of connect with you, and then I want to unpack a little bit more on the kind of the pathway.
I'm pretty open, so I actually give out my phone number. So my number is 918-269-5000. Email is Jewett, Jewitt1 @gmail.com. We have a website called your1degree.com. And so it's primarily a coaching
Yeah.
ministry. And we really come alongside of people. We invest in them. And so that's really pretty much it.
So tell me, you started way back when in the corporate world, and were there things that you kind of understood and learned that then you get to this point? I believe it was in the early 2000s, around 2004, where you kind of made this move to full-time consulting.
Yeah, I'd started to develop this idea probably around the 1999, 2000, and I started coaching people with it. And bottom line is, a bunch of those people came to me in 2004 and said, "We think you need to go do this full time versus your other consulting business." And they really challenged me. And so I had to spend some time really thinking about making a shift to a nonprofit format. And so that's what I did in 2004. And I've been doing that for 20 years now. But I learned from the corporate world that you could be good at a lot of things, but they could either be neutral or they could drain you. And actually, the first part of what we do with people is we look at greens, yellows, and reds.
Right.
We have them evaluate do an assessment on themselves where they look at about 170 words and ask themselves, is this primarily a green that actually energizes them when they use it? Is it a yellow that is just kind of neutral? It doesn't drain them or energize them, but it's just something they do.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't mind doing them because they get things done.
Yeah.
But then they got reds. Well, all of us have red abilities that we can do, but they drain us. We have to get ourselves psyched up to get it done. And usually we need to do it first in the day, or else we won't get it done at all. We procrastinate reds a lot. And what I've learned was that most people end up getting out of balance with their greens, yellows, and reds. I had one job in corporate life where I was doing 65 yellows. And but for most people, the yellows start to squeeze the greens out of their life.
Wow.
So they end up in what we call a net negative. They're basically starting to die at an accelerated rate. Their heart, their soul is shriveling up because they're running out of gas.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's kind of the idea of the greens, yellows, and reds. What I've loved about it, it gives people a way to manage. So when they're starting to feel lethargic, or apathetic or disillusioned or cynical, or they start to see negative symptoms in their life that they don't want to have,
Yeah.
this actually can help them trace back to what's causing it. And it may not be a spiritual problem, may not be that they're just a dirtball or anything.
Mm-hmm.
It, it actually relates back to they're getting out of balance with who they are.
Yeah.
They don't have enough greens in their life to keep their heart energized. So it's starting to show up in negative symptoms. We've coached a lot of wonderful people, even missionaries and pastors who have showed up at my doorstep just burned out.
Wow.
And they
Yeah.
felt really bad about themselves. They felt guilty. They felt ashamed until they found out that it wasn't anything about them. It was about they drifted away from who they were. And I've learned that the mission won't carry you. No matter what wonderful mission you're a part of, God has given each of us a design to carry out that mission.
Yeah.
And if we drift from the design, first of all, the mission won't really get accomplished, but then we won't even be able to, we can't even be sustainable. We can't even keep doing it for the rest of our life. So that's one of the reasons why I'm passionate about the whole driver's idea, the greens, yellows, and reds.
So let's unpack that a little bit. What do you mean by are these drivers' natural abilities? Is it a part of inherent to our personalities? Is it learned from childhood?
No, it's natural. It's natural. It's just the way you're wired. I'm wired to be. I'm a high relational person, so I have a high relational capacity. I love advising and guiding about more than anything, or mentoring and coaching. Can do a lot of other things. I negotiated contracts for a big corporation for 20 years, but those were really not what motivated me. I could do it, but they weren't really what drove me. So I don't know. We've talked about the acrostic we have. It's a designed acrostic. The D stands for drivers, the abilities to energize. The E stands for your experiences or your story. The S stands for skills and knowledge you've acquired. The I is for interest, passions. What do you most care about? The G is for gifting, and the N is for your nature, your key personality traits and capacities. So we're looking to help people figure out what is their design and how do I steward my design going forward.
Yeah, and sometimes that's the key to really unlocking people's next step in life. You know, we have a lot of entrepreneurs that listen, and we have business leaders that listen, as well as those that are in ministry. What would you say to a business owner? They're not in full-time ministry. They own a business, or they maybe are finishing up grad school and going to go into the corporate world. And kind of on the beginnings of things. What would you say to those?
Well, it applies just as much in the business world. One of the people I recently coached has a very responsible job. Reports to the CEO of a large corporation, and took the first exercise of 1 degree into the workplace, and took there's 7 direct reports through the first exercise, and because it really looked at okay, what energizes my people, what drains them. Is there something we can do to tweak how we organize our work? And they found it extremely satisfying. As a matter of fact, some of those managers that took the assessment are now taking it down line to their people to do the same thing. So, it's actually easier to admit that something drains you than that you stink at it.
True.
Not that they're necessarily the same, but and even when a boss will admit to his people that some of his responsibilities do drain him, that's actually pretty freeing to the people to hear that from the boss.
Is it possible to be? Is it possible to be good at something that drains you?
Absolutely, yeah. And that's what's kind of tricky about this, and I think that's why we talk about what are the negative symptoms that you want to be paying attention to.
Yeah.
Is it harder to get going in the morning? Is it you getting kind of grumpy? Are you more pleasant to live with or less? you know,
Mm-hmm.
are you getting kind of cynical about things? Some of the more serious symptoms, believe it or not, are clinical depression,
Mm.
more susceptible to addictions, more susceptible to infidelity, more susceptible to suicide. This is how serious this thing is when we drift away from how God designed us. And what's been shocking to me is he's willing to let a good person suffer if they drift away from how he's made them, because his glory is tied to our design.
Right.
When you look at an eagle soaring, his glory is displayed through that eagle. If the eagle tries to be a squirrel, it might be funny, but it'd be kind of sad.
Yeah.
You know?
Really missing the destiny of what we were created for.
Yeah, yeah,
Something that you one of the key things I thought was interesting is talking about the elements, for discovering, and you kind of go through this step process where it's understanding the principles that are in the scriptures, and then going the next step being about really surrendering to God. And can you kind of walk through some of those and maybe unpack that?
yeah. I think the first step of this process is discover, identify, clarify. I mean, discover, identify. What are your words? What are the descriptors that best describe you? Second one is clarify. What do those words mean? So if you say the word, I like to organize. Well, organize what?
Mm.
Data, people,
Yeah.
things. Okay, get
Mm-hmm.
clarity. What does that word really mean to you? Then the third step now is embracing. That's where there's a faith element to it. Am I really embracing who I'm discovering that I actually am? Or am I still trying to be somebody else? Am I apologizing for who I am? So many
Wow.
people are still in the apologizing, wishing they were somebody else mode, and it's so unhealthy.
Yeah.
Okay, and then after you embrace something, then you commit to start to align yourself with what God is showing you are, who you are. And after you commit, then you apply, you start making decisions. Like you go into a meeting at work and you choose to use something that God's been showing you he's elevating.
Mm.
Well, that's kind of a faith journey. You're
Yeah.
experimenting, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And then as you apply things, you try it out, you're trying these words out, then you watch what happens. Watch what God does. And I tell you what, David, as soon as someone starts to realize that God Almighty is in the middle of this process, it
Mm.
isn't just some assessment somebody created. It's something that God is actually going to do. He's actually going to work through. That becomes extremely powerful in a person's life. I've had so many people set free from their crazy
Wow.
schedule. So
Yeah.
many people set free from trying to be somebody else. It's been so rewarding to coach these thousands of people over the last 20 years, and to see that it's helped me. If I have time, I can share a little bit of a story.
Yeah.
When I was 49 years old, I guess it was maybe 47. I'd realized I had learned a lot about myself a year before, but I wasn't applying it. I was still trying. I was running a supply chain organization, but I was still kind of doing it the way I'd learned it the previous 20 years.
Hmm.
But I felt like the Lord was prompting me to tell me, you aren't using what I've elevated. I want you to start using that. Well, I didn't know how to, and I was afraid to, but I committed to start to use those abilities: advise, guide, mentor, coach, relationship build. I started using those things more in my work. Well, what ended up happening was I had the biggest impact of my whole career.
Wow.
And the billionaire chairman of our company came to me and said, "You've accomplished more productive change than anybody else in the whole company, including me." Now, that's 4,000 employees in that company.
Wow.
So that was a real turning point for me at 47, where I actually started to be proactive with who I was versus just being a reactor to the demands
Yeah.
of my environment. So
It's powerful. I think that, it's tough, I think, in the rat race of life sometimes to just take a step back and go, what am I doing? What is this void? And I'm not talking about, well, I need, Christ in my life. I'm talking about being just a working dad. And like in my situation where you love God, you take your kids to church, you try to provide for your family and all the normal things, that we know from the scriptures. But when you feel like that you're not doing something that you're supposed to be doing, and that's part of that whole rub with, you've got these reds, and you're doing a bunch of things that are just completely draining you. And I think that I'm trying to put myself in the place of those that are listening that might be at a cross point in their life, or they're trying to, COVID did that for a lot of people. 2020, 21, a lot of people changed careers, and some people I know have changed careers again since then, because change wasn't just the right thing. They changed because they had the opportunity. But, it's like, and I know you're a fan as well. The author John Eldredge says, what makes you awake? What awakens your heart and your soul? And you have to protect your heart at all costs. Those are the kind of things that, aren't necessarily comfortable a lot of times for men, and it's certainly not too comfortable. You're not going to hear it on a Sunday morning where we're like, hey, maybe you're in the wrong place, career, or maybe, you're in the wrong place with the way you're handling your business. So as people dive into this deeper, what would you say in your experience with the people that you've worked with and coached over the years is maybe some of the more common things that people have found out that has really been eye-opening and has changed their trajectory?
I've had people, as they start to recognize what has drained and why they are so drained, and they're also to realize it's not because they're a dirtball. It's because they've drifted away from their design. I mean, I've had tears. I've had just relief, a removal of shame, of guilt, of that's why there's this is a cause and effect. If I drift from my design, I will experience these symptoms.
Yeah.
I think that God actually cares about them.
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of grown convinced that most people don't believe that God actually cares about their day to day, what's on their plate. And I believe that He cares a lot about what's on our plate. And He wants to help us do more things that are green, because He wants us to stay energized, because we aren't going to have much of an influence on people for His purposes if we're worn out. We're
Yeah.
not going to be very attractive to people if we're just bitter, angry, cynical,
Yeah.
worn out. You know,
Very true.
He wants us to stay highly energized and positive and encouraging. I think there's no doubt about it. Most people struggle a little bit sometimes with just fear, okay? Fear of making a change. I may be miserable where I am, but at least I know where I am. Okay,
Right.
so I imagine that for most people, there's some degree of crisis of belief. Can I really go toward my design? Do I actually have the freedom to go toward my design? And the reason this is a coaching ministry, David, is because our job as coaches is to help people get clarity on what is their design, but even more importantly, how do you take your design into your current reality?
That's good.
That's not a quick solution. You need somebody who can walk alongside you as you're trying
Mm-hmm.
to apply what you're learning to your day to day,
Yeah.
and to give you the courage, to give you ideas, to give you motivation. That's why the coaching is extremely important. I don't recommend people just going through this process by themselves.
Yeah.
They're missing a very important element of having someone come alongside them And and let's face it, I don't think our enemy wants us to do this.
Yeah. No, he doesn't want us to find out the real reason why we're here and what we've been designed and created to do. As a friend of our podcast, Simon Bailey, said so well, is that God put you on this planet to, as he says it, what have I been put here to solve? What have I been put here to accomplish? And it's figuring out what makes you that person that you are, and it's not accidental. I think that that's what I think is really incredible. And you and I have recently been able to be a part of this. You've spoken in classes and seeing college students who've got their entire lives ahead of them, having their eyes open. But at the same time, you work with a lot of people that have probably maybe even middle of their career or late in their career, and it's not too late to go, hey, let's figure this out.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the hope. And what's great about coaching somebody who's older is they have a lot of data.
That's true.
They have a lot of data, and they can reach conclusions a little faster because there's not as much unknown about what their life is like.
Mm-hmm.
And if they'll assess and then be courageous enough to make some decisions, they can get on the track to finish well pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But they've got to have the courage and the discipline to go ahead and do it. And I'm coaching a guy who's in his mid-60s, huge responsibility. We start talking about it, first phone call, and he's crying on the phone.
Wow.
Because he's realizing that as responsible and as important as his job is, it's just gotten kind of boring, kind of flat, unrewarding. Yeah. Well, as he's starting to go through this process now, it's starting to give him hope, giving him some direction for, I can move into my 60s and 70s and thrive in those decades and even beyond. Yes. I'm 74. I feel like I'm not even at my peak yet. I'm just starting to see my life matter in ways I never would have imagined.
Yeah, love it. Well, the program is called Your One Degree, and the website is your1degree.com. And I want to invite our listeners and our viewers to make an effort there to go in the show notes and find out more about Dave Jewitt and what he's done with this program and contact him. Dave, I really appreciate you coming on. I know you're busy. I know I've seen your schedule. You're a busy guy and you got a lot going. And we want to thank you for coming on the podcast. And the great thing is there are people all over the world that listen to the podcast in many, many countries. And I hope that today we've been able to connect them with maybe exactly what they've been looking for is what is new? What is this destiny that I've put on the shelf and how do I get on that path? Because I do really think that you are helping a lot of people discover that.
Thanks. And just wanted to add that we coach couples.
Oh, great! Yeah,
and we have a bunch of coaches that coach people. We have women that coach women individually if they want. So we'd love to help you if we can. So
love it. Well, again, thank you for coming on. And remember, every Tuesday we drop a new podcast. Hit that bell on YouTube and be sure to go to pray.com/GEB America and follow us there. Until next time, I'm David Grove saying so long from the studios of GEB America.